ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. EU High Representative Josep Borrell's recent visit to Kyiv underscores the bloc's steadfast support for Ukraine amidst its ongoing defense against Russian aggression. In a joint press conference, Borrell reiterated the EU's commitment to accelerate military aid and emphasized the importance of Ukrainian self-reliance in arms production. His visit just after Donald Trump's election also hinted at potential shifts in U.S. support, raising questions about the future of Western aid. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this is Jon Sweet, retired military intelligence officer, and Anders Åslund, a senior fellow of the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Hello, guys, and welcome to TVP World.
Hey, thanks for bringing me back on the show.
All right. So, Jon, sir, can you help us understand how significant is the EU's push for fast-track military aid to Ukraine, and what impact could fewer red lines on weapons have on this conflict?
Yeah, the fast track has always been an issue, and here we are, nearing the 3-year mark, and still slow rolling ammunition and key weapon systems to the Ukraine military. So fast tracking is a good thing. I think the EU right now is obviously nervous, a little angst concerning the election of President Trump and what he may or may not do. But I think we're leaning a little bit far in the foxhole, to use a military speak. And we just need to sit back and watch as the Trump administration puts forth a plan. And we're not going to see a plan really until we start seeing the cabinet members filled in. Then we'll get a good feel, I think, on the American response.
Right. Mr. Åslund, can you help us understand what might recent U.S. political development, especially when it comes to Trump's election, might impact Ukraine's foreign aid and security landscape?
Well, it's a big scare. And of course, in particular, Vice President-elect J.D. Vance has more or less said that the U.S. should force Ukraine to go for a devastating peace agreement, giving up land, and that the U.S. will not support Ukraine military any longer. So I think that Mr. Borrell now decided to go to Kyiv as a farewell visit. His job will be gone at the end of this month, and showing that the European Union still holds firm and supports Ukraine. But I also noticed, which is surprising, that he had nothing new to offer. It would be the strange if he could offer anything new, since this is the end of his term. But the European Union will have to stand all the firmer behind Ukraine when the U.S. is wobbly, to say the least.
Right, Mr. Sweet, like also Mr. Åslund has just mentioned, the position of the new Trump presidency might be observed by J.D. Vance's comment. And to quote one of Trump's strategists, Brian Lanza, who's commented on BBC that, saying that Crimea is essentially gone and Ukraine must have a realistic vision for peace. What does it say about the U.S. president-elect's position on Ukraine's support?
I'm not sure those are his positions. Those were the positions of J.D. Vance and this gentleman. We just had a conversation between President Zelensky and the incoming President Trump on 8 November, in which some words of assurances were given to the president. Look, at the end of the day, this isn't about settling. This isn't about negotiations and peace, because there will not be peace as long as Russia is on the other side of the border, and that they are enabled to reset and rearm and to do this again. This is a completely different operational environment than the one in which Trump left. It's no longer just Russia. It's Russia, North Korea, China, Iran, all colluding, all working together. This is much bigger than one country versus another. The only way to win this war, and I get tired of hearing people say defend, because defend doesn't win. The only way to win this war is to defeat Russia in Ukraine, and that means giving them the weapon systems they need to defeat those weapons and soldiers that are in Russia right now working their way across the border. That's the only way this wins, and I think he's going to surround himself with some pretty good talent. If you look at Robert O'Brien, Mike Waltz, Mike Pompeo, and Mike Rogers, these are all pro-Ukrainian individuals who are going to be advising him at the highest level. So I think we have to be somewhat patient, but we're at the 32-month mark now, right? So there's not a whole lot of room for patience. There's only room for advancement.
Right, like Mr. Sweet aptly pointed out, perhaps patience is running thin here. And when it comes to the fast track of military aid for Ukraine, Mr. Åslund, can you help us understand also why this decision is made only now, and couldn't it have been done earlier?
Of course, all these decisions should have been made much earlier. And in particular, the European Union has been very slow when it comes to military aid. The US, of course, had a delay because of Republicans in Congress of half a year earlier this year with military aid. And now, as I understand it, it's $6 billion of more military aid that the U.S. Has and can give. This is little and too late, given that there is a $300 billion of frozen Russian central bank assets in the West, 2/3 of it in Belgium. This money should be taken, given to Ukraine, and Ukraine probably needs $100 billion extra in financing in order to win the war. There's no reasonable apology in the West for not doing this. This is what needs to be done, and the earlier it's done, the less the war will cost, and the better the outcome will be, and the early it will end.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Sweet, one of the criticism when it comes to the Biden administration's handling of the Ukraine situation is actually indeed the slow walking of aid, kind of keeping Ukraine on life support, but not enough to outright win the war. You just mentioned that Trump actually has going to surround himself with a lot of pro-Ukrainian people, especially when it comes to the defense sector. Do you see there's that actually be a pivotal change for the course of this war going forward?
I think it can be. Look, one of the authors of a Republican proposal in November of last year called a Proposal Plan for Victory in Ukraine was Mike Rogers. And right now, the administration has reached out to Mike Rogers and considering him for Secretary of Defense. Mike Pompeo is very close to the administration, a former director of CIA and the Secretary of State. These gentlemen understand the problem set in Ukraine, and they have put forth recommendations on how to succeed. But how to succeed is not to continue to provide defensive weapons. How to succeed is to release authorities for precision deep strike capabilities so Ukraine can hit those Russian targets, those troop formations, but more importantly, to hit those sites where the cruise missiles are being launched, where the ballistic missiles are being attached to aircraft that are flying to Ukraine and striking Ukrainian citizens, okay? That's what needs to be done. Tanks and Bradleys also, and artillery, but not Humvees and not, small caliber weapons. I mean, they're important, don't get me wrong, but defense is not going to win this war. Offense is the key, and Patton said it best. It's attack, and attack some more. And we need to get to that point. And I hope, with the leadership that's coming in to surround President Trump, that he's going to get that type of advice.
Right. Mr. Åslund, could Borrell's recent statement on Ukraine being having self-determination in peace talks suggest any sort of shift in the EU's diplomatic stance?
Not that I can see, but let me respond to this. Trump has a lot of very scary people around him, in particular Richard Grenell, who's frequently mentioned as a possible Secretary of State, couldn't care less about Ukraine. So he essentially has two, what seems to be approximately similarly large groups. One that wants to support Ukraine, and the other group that doesn't want to support Ukraine at all. And we can't say which group that will be most represented. What President-elect Trump has done previously is that he has appointed people from both sides, and then they fight it out in a completely unpredictable way. But there's something here that was just said, that I do think that Trump will change the previous decision-making. So this idea that Ukraine should not be allowed to hit Russian military targets in Russia with U.S. arms, a completely irrational decision. I think that will, in all probability, be changed, and that would be a big thing. But there's another idea that particularly Mike Pompeo has pushed, that the U.S. should support Ukraine with loans, land lease, rather than with grants. So there is a broad idea that in order to win the support of Trump, you have to come up with something that is different from what Biden has done, in the same way as Trump wanted to change everything from what Obama had done. And I think this is probably the most useful way of trying to interpret what Trump can come up with.
Right, and like Mr. Åslund has pointed out, change and unpredictability might be the characterization of the new administration coming in. When it comes to Ukraine and its openness to cooperate with the incoming U.S. administration, do you think that, Mr. Sweet, that Ukraine will be able to maneuver with these unpredictability taking into consideration?
I think they will. Look, the President Zelensky and his staff, along with his general officers, have been very successful right now, working with the U.S. government, working with NATO, working with the EU. I mean, how many they've secured 10, I think, at last count, bilateral security agreements. So they're constantly looking for advantages, and they're constantly using weapon systems that are provided to them in asymmetric ways that we hadn't considered or thought about. The ingenuity and the adaptiveness of this government in this country to put forth the fight that they're putting forth. Just look at the ability now they have with their own organic weapon systems to strike targets 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers away. They're going to be able to work with the administration. The administration will work with them, because at the end of the day, it's not about just Ukraine. Ukraine is the priority, but the security of Western Europe and Eastern Europe also, particularly the Baltic states, those countries that have been subjugated by Russia in the past. Okay, everyone remembers this. It's within the history books that they're taught and that they've lived. They're going to work this out, and it's going to take a little bit of time as they feel one another out. But I think we're going to see positive results soon.
Right. Last but not least, Mr. Åslund, we can't talk about this conflict without the involvement of Russia. And what can we expect from Russia's communication with the incoming U.S. administration? And how do you think that's going to shape the dynamics of this conflict?
That's a big question, and we really don't know. President-elect Trump has been very careful never to say a negative word about President Putin in any regard. He called President Putin a genius when he attacked Ukraine in February 2022, and he has not withdrawn that statement. He never withdraws any statement. And he has said that he will settle this on the day one, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The understanding has been that he will force Ukraine to give up a lot of land, which has also been informally told by his advisors, but not by him personally. It remains to be seen. And we just heard from Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs Ryabkov in Moscow that they keep informal contacts with the incoming American administration. So something is likely to happen pretty fast. It's unlikely to be good or professional, but something is likely to happen.
Right. So like I mentioned, perhaps we will be looking at the development very soon. Meanwhile, thank you guys so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.